Maya Chen walked slowly down the long hallway of Berkshire Conservatory. Her old sneakers made soft sounds on the shiny marble floor. The walls were covered with pictures of famous musicians. Their eyes seemed to follow her as she passed by. She carried a worn backpack on her shoulder. Inside were her music books, all used and bought from secondhand stores. The covers were bent and some pages were missing. But Maya knew every note written in those books by heart. Other students walked past her in groups. They talked loudly about their weekend concerts and private lessons. Their clothes looked expensive. Their instruments were new and shiny. Maya looked down at her faded jeans and old sweater. Her grandmother had bought them for her last Christmas. The music theory classroom was at the end of the hall. Maya could hear piano music coming from inside. Someone was playing a difficult piece perfectly. She stopped outside the door and listened. The music was beautiful but cold. It had no feeling in it. Maya thought about her own piano playing. She had never taken formal lessons. Her grandmother had taught her everything she knew. They lived in a small apartment above Mr. Kim's laundromat. The piano was old and some keys stuck when you pressed them. But Maya loved that piano more than anything in the world. She remembered the first time her grandmother showed her how to play. Maya was only 6 years old. Her small fingers could barely reach the keys. "Music comes from here," her grandmother had said, pointing to Maya's heart. "Not from books or teachers, from here." Maya pushed open the classroom door. 20 students sat in neat rows. Professor Williams stood at the front next to a grand piano. The piano was huge and black and perfect. Maya had never seen anything so beautiful. She found an empty seat in the back corner. That was where she always sat, away from the other students, away from their stares and whispers. "Good morning, class," Professor Williams said. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. Maya liked him because he never made her feel stupid when she asked questions. "Today we will discuss advanced harmony," he continued. "Can anyone tell me about the circle of fifths?" Hands shot up around the room. Maya knew the answer. Her grandmother had taught her about the circle of fifths when she was 10. But Maya kept her hand down. She always kept her hand down. A girl named Sarah answered the question perfectly. She used big words that Maya understood but never said out loud. Sarah's father was a famous composer. Her mother played violin in the city orchestra. Music was in Sarah's blood. Maya opened her notebook. It was from the dollar store and had a picture of a cartoon cat on the cover. All the other students had expensive leather notebooks with their names printed in gold letters. She started to write down what Professor Williams was saying. Her handwriting was neat and careful. Maya had learned to write everything down because she could not afford to buy the textbooks. The library had old copies she could borrow, but she could only keep them for 2 weeks. Behind her, she heard 2 students whispering. "Look at her notebook," one said. "It's so childish." They giggled quietly. Maya pretended not to hear. She had learned to pretend many things. Professor Williams moved to the piano. "Let me demonstrate this concept," he said. His fingers moved across the keys like water. The music filled the room with perfect harmony. Maya closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. When she opened her eyes, she saw Jonathan Blackwell staring at her. Jonathan was the star student of the class. His father was a world-famous pianist. His mother owned 3 music schools. Jonathan had been playing piano since he was 3 years old. He had perfect technique. He had perfect posture. He had perfect everything. But when Maya listened to him play, she felt nothing. His music was like a machine. Beautiful but empty. Jonathan whispered something to his friend Marcus. They both looked at Maya and smiled in a mean way. Maya felt her cheeks get hot. She looked down at her desk and tried to make herself invisible. The class continued for another hour. Professor Williams talked about complex musical ideas. Maya understood most of it, but she had learned these things differently. Her grandmother had taught her with stories and feelings, not with big words and rules. When class ended, students began to pack their things. Maya put her books in her backpack slowly. She did not want to walk out with the others. They always walked in groups. and talked about things Maya did not understand. Private tutors and summer music camps and expensive concerts. Maya, Professor Williams called out. Could I speak with you for a moment? Maya's heart started beating fast. Had she done something wrong? She walked to the front of the classroom. The other students filed out, still talking loudly. How are you doing in class? Professor Williams asked. His voice was gentle. Fine, sir, Maya said quietly. I notice you never participate in discussions. But when you turn in your assignments, they show real understanding, real insight. Maya did not know what to say. She looked at her shoes. The semester showcase is coming up, Professor Williams continued. All students must perform. Have you thought about what you might play? Maya's stomach dropped. She had been dreading the showcase for weeks. All the other students would play. Famous pieces by great composers. They would wear beautiful clothes and play on the perfect grand piano. What could she possibly play? I'm not sure yet, she said. Professor Williams nodded. Take your time. But remember, Maya, music is not about perfection. It's about expression. It's about sharing something real with your audience. Maya nodded and quickly left the classroom. In the hallway, she could hear Jonathan and his friends laughing about something. She hurried past them, hoping they would not notice her. Outside the conservatory, Maya waited for the bus. The building looked like a palace with its tall columns and stone walls. Sometimes she still could not believe she was a student there. She had won a scholarship based on a recording she made on her grandmother's old piano. The judges said she had natural talent. But here, surrounded by students who had studied music their whole lives, Maya felt like a fraud. The bus ride home took 40 minutes. Maya sat by the window and watched the city change. First the nice neighborhoods with big houses and clean streets. Then the middle areas with normal apartments and shops. Finally, her neighborhood with small buildings and busy streets. She got off at her stop and walked to her building. The laundromat was still open. Mr. Kim waved at her through the window. The smell of soap and warm clothes drifted onto the sidewalk. Maya climbed the narrow stairs to her apartment. Her grandmother was sitting in her favorite chair, reading a book. She looked up when Maya came in. How was school today, little bird? Her grandmother asked. That was her nickname for Maya, little bird. It was okay, Maya said. But her voice sounded sad. Her grandmother put down her book. Come here, she said. Maya sat on the arm of the chair. Her grandmother took her hand. Tell me what's wrong. Maya wanted to tell her everything about the showcase, about the other students, about feeling like she did not belong. But she did not want to worry her grandmother. Nothing's wrong, she said. Her grandmother smiled. Little bird, I may be old, but I'm not foolish. Something is bothering you. Maya looked at the old piano in the corner. It had been her grandmother's most precious possession for 50 years. The wood was scratched and some of the white keys had turned yellow. But to Maya, it was the most beautiful instrument in the world. There's a concert coming up, Maya finally said. Everyone has to perform. I don't know what to play. Her grandmother was quiet for a moment. Then she stood up and walked to the piano. She sat on the old bench and patted the space next to her. Maya sat down beside her. Her grandmother placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. It was a simple melody, but it was full of love and sadness and hope. Maya had heard this song 1,000 times, but it still made her heart feel full. This is what music should be, her grandmother said as she played. Not perfect notes or fancy techniques, it should be truth. It should be you. Maya watched her grandmother's hands move across the keys. They were old hands with wrinkles and spots, but they created magic. I'm scared, Maya whispered. Fear is normal, little bird, but don't let it stop you from sharing your gift. You have something special inside you, something that can't be taught in schools or bought with money. Maya leaned against her grandmother's shoulder. Outside, the city noise continued. Cars honking, people talking, the washing machines spinning downstairs. But in this small room, with this old piano and her grandmother's love, Maya felt safe. She thought about tomorrow's class. about Jonathan's perfect playing and Sarah's expensive clothes, about the showcase that was getting closer every day. Her stomach still felt nervous, but something else was there too. A small spark of determination. Maybe her grandmother was right. Maybe she did have something special. Something that came from her heart, not from fancy schools or private lessons. Something real. Maya looked at the old piano keys and made a quiet promise to herself. She would find something to play for the showcase, something that was truly hers, something that would show everyone who she really was, even if it scared her to death. 3 days had passed since Maya's talk with her grandmother. She walked through the conservatory halls with her head down, thinking about the showcase. Every practice room she passed had students inside, playing difficult pieces perfectly. Maya stopped outside practice room B through the small window. She could see Jonathan Blackwell at the piano. His fingers moved like lightning across the keys. The music was loud and impressive. Other students had gathered outside to listen. They whispered to each other about how amazing he was. "He's going to win the showcase for sure," said a girl named Lisa. "His technique is perfect," agreed another student. "And his father taught him the piece personally." Maya felt her stomach twist. She had been trying to choose a piece for 3 days. Every song she thought of seemed too simple compared to what the other students were playing. She kept walking down the hall. Her destination was practice room K, the smallest room in the basement. It was the only room that was always available, because nobody wanted to use it. The piano was old and the room smelled like dust, but it was quiet and private. Maya pushed open the door and turned on the light. The small room had gray walls and no windows. The piano was brown instead of black, and several keys were chipped. But when Maya sat down and pressed the keys, the sound was warm and gentle. She opened her music book and tried to play a piece by Chopin. Her fingers stumbled over the difficult parts. She tried again and again, but it never sounded right. Frustrated, she closed the book and put her head in her hands. "This is hopeless," she whispered to herself. From somewhere above, she could hear Jonathan still playing. The music drifted down through the ceiling, perfect and cold. Maya wondered if she should just tell Professor Williams she was sick and skip the showcase entirely. The door behind her opened suddenly. Maya turned around, expecting to see another student looking for a practice room. Instead, Jonathan Blackwell stood in the doorway. He was not alone. Marcus and 2 other students were with him. Well, Jonathan said with a mean smile. "Look what we found." Maya's heart started beating fast. She stood up from the piano bench. "We heard someone trying to play Chopin," Marcus said, "but it sounded like a cat walking on the piano." The other students laughed. Maya felt her face turn red. "Was that you?" Jonathan asked, stepping into the small room. "Trying to play real music?" Maya did not answer. She wanted to run past them and escape, but they were blocking the doorway. "Let me guess," Jonathan continued. "You're planning to play something embarrassing. At the showcase, maybe Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star?" More laughter. Maya's hands shook. She picked up her music book and held it against her chest like a shield. "Actually," Jonathan said, looking at the old piano, "maybe this is more your speed. This broken piano in the basement. It matches your level perfectly." "Leave me alone," Maya said quietly. "What was that?" Jonathan cupped his ear mockingly. "I couldn't hear you. You're always so quiet in class, like a little mouse." "A church mouse," added Marcus, "poor and silent." Maya tried to push past them, but Jonathan stepped sideways to block her path. "Wait, don't go yet," he said. "I want to help you. Since you're obviously struggling to find a piece for the showcase, let me suggest something. Why don't you play Happy Birthday? Everyone knows that one. Even children can play it." The other students found this hilarious. Their laughter echoed in the small room, making it sound even louder. "Or better yet," Jonathan continued, enjoying his audience, "why don't you just skip the showcase? Save yourself the embarrassment. Everyone will be playing real classical music. Rachmaninoff, Beethoven, Liszt. What could you possibly play that would fit with that?" Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of these people. I have every right to perform, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. Rights? Jonathan laughed. Just because you have a scholarship doesn't mean you belong here. Some of us have been training for this our whole lives. Our parents are professional musicians. We've studied with the best teachers in the world. What have you got? A few lessons from your grandmother? Maya's anger flared. My grandmother is a better musician than you'll ever be. The room went quiet. Jonathan's smile disappeared. Excuse me? He said, his voice cold. Maya realized she had made a mistake. But it was too late to take the words back. I said my grandmother is a better musician than you. Jonathan stepped closer. Your grandmother? The one who taught you to play like a beginner? The one who taught you on some broken piano in whatever slum you crawled out of? Maya's hands clenched into fists. Don't talk about my grandmother that way. I'll talk about her however I want, Jonathan said. Just like I'll talk about you? You think you can come here with your thrift store clothes and your pathetic playing and somehow compete with us? You think your little sob story makes you special? You don't know anything about me, Maya said. I know enough, Jonathan replied. I know you don't belong here. I know you're going to embarrass yourself at the showcase. And I know that after everyone sees how bad you really are, you'll probably drop out and go back to wherever you came from. Maya felt something break inside her chest. The words hurt worse than any physical pain. You know what the saddest part is? Jonathan continued. You actually think you're good. You sit in class and take your little notes and think you understand music. But music isn't something you can learn from books. It's in your blood or it isn't, and clearly it isn't in yours. That's enough, Maya said, her voice shaking. No, I don't think it is enough, Jonathan said. I think someone needs to tell you the truth. You're wasting everyone's time here. Professor Williams only keeps you around because the school needs charity cases for their brochures. Look how diverse we are. We even let poor kids pretend to be musicians. The other students shifted uncomfortably. Even they seemed to think Jonathan was going too far. But here's the thing about pretending, Jonathan continued. Eventually, everyone sees through it. And that's what's going to happen at the showcase. Everyone's going to see that you're just a fraud. Maya had heard enough. She pushed past Jonathan. With more force than he expected. He stumbled backward, surprised. Where are you going? He called after her. Can't handle the truth? Maya ran up the stairs, not caring if other students saw her crying. She ran through the main hall and out the front doors of the conservatory. She did not stop running until she reached the bus stop. On the bus ride home, Maya stared out the window. Jonathan's words played over and over in her mind. Maybe he was right. Maybe she did not belong at the conservatory. Maybe she was just fooling herself when she got home. Her grandmother was cooking dinner. The smell of rice and vegetables filled the small apartment. You're home early, little bird, her grandmother said. Then she saw Maya's face. What happened? Maya tried to smile. Nothing. Just tired. But her grandmother was not fooled. She turned off the stove and sat down at the small kitchen table. She patted the chair next to her. Sit, she said, gently. Maya sat down and finally let the tears come. She told her grandmother everything, about Jonathan's cruel words, about feeling like she did not belong, about wanting to quit the showcase. Her grandmother listened without interrupting. When Maya finished, she was quiet for a long time. Tell me about this boy, her grandmother finally said. Jonathan? He's the best student in the class. His father is famous. He's been playing piano since he was 3. And when he plays, how does it make you feel? Maya thought about it. Empty. Like the music has no soul, her grandmother nodded. I see. And when you play, how do you feel? Different. Like the music is alive, like it's telling a story. Then you have something he does not have? Her grandmother said. You have heart, but he's technically perfect. Everyone says so. Technique can be learned, little bird. But heart cannot be taught. It is a gift. And you have been given a very special gift. Maya wiped her eyes. But what if he's right? What? If I don't belong there? Her grandmother stood up and walked to the old piano. She sat down and began to play the same simple melody from 3 days ago, but tonight it sounded different. Tonight it sounded like courage. When I was your age, her grandmother said as she played, people told me I could not be a musician because I was a woman, because I was poor, because I was the wrong color. But music does not care about any of those things. Music only cares about truth. Maya joined her grandmother on the piano bench. This boy, this Jonathan, her grandmother continued, he is afraid of you. That is why he said those terrible things. Afraid of me. Why would he be afraid of me? Because you have something he wants but cannot buy, something his father cannot teach him, something that threatens everything he believes about himself. Maya looked at her grandmother's hands on the keys. They were still creating beautiful music. What should I do about the showcase? Maya asked. You should play, her grandmother said simply. You should play like your life depends on it. Because, in a way, it does. But what if I fail? What if everyone laughs? Then you fail. But you fail being yourself, not pretending to be someone else. That is better than any success built on lies. Maya felt something shift inside her chest. The fear was still there, but it was smaller now. In its place was something else. Something that felt like determination. What should I play? She asked. 2 weeks later, Maya walked into Professor Williams' classroom with a different feeling in her chest. She still felt nervous, but underneath the nerves was something new. Something that felt like quiet confidence she had spent every evening. Learning her grandmother's song. Finding my voice was more difficult than anything she had ever played. But every note felt right under her fingers. Every phrase told a story she understood. Professor Williams stood at the front of the class with a clipboard in his hand. Good morning, everyone. Today we will finalize the performance list for next week's showcase. Maya's stomach fluttered. The showcase was only 7 days away. 7 days to prepare for the most important performance of her life. As you know, Professor Williams continued, the board of directors from the International Music Foundation will be attending. They are looking for promising young musicians to sponsor for advanced training. Excited whispers filled the room. Maya knew this was a big opportunity. The International Music Foundation gave scholarships to study with the world's best teachers. It was the kind of chance that could change someone's life forever. Jonathan, let's start with you, Professor Williams said. Jonathan stood up confidently. He was wearing an expensive jacket and his hair was perfectly styled. I will be performing Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto No. 2 in C minor, he announced. The class murmured with approval. It was one of the most difficult pieces in classical music. Only the most skilled pianists attempted it. Excellent choice, Professor Williams said, making a note on his clipboard. Sarah? Sarah stood next. I'll be playing Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. Another impressive choice. Maya felt her confidence shrinking. These were pieces by famous composers, pieces that music lovers all over the world knew and respected. One by one, the other students announced their selections. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody, Debussy's Clair de Lune. All beautiful, famous, challenging pieces. Finally, Professor Williams looked at Maya. And Maya? What will you be performing? Maya stood up slowly. Her legs felt shaky. Every eye in the room was on her. She could see Jonathan smirking in the front row. I will be performing an original composition, she said clearly. The room fell completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody even seemed to breathe. Then Jonathan's laugh broke the silence. It started as a small chuckle but quickly grew louder. Soon other students were joining in. Original? Jonathan said between laughs. You're going to play something. You wrote yourself? That's quite ambitious, Maya, Professor Williams said carefully. What is the title of your piece? Maya's face felt hot, but she kept her voice steady. It's called Finding My Voice. Jonathan burst into fresh laughter. Finding My Voice? Are you serious? This isn't elementary school, Maya. This is a serious conservatory showcase. Jonathan, that's enough, Professor Williams said sharply, but Jonathan was not finished. Professor, you can't let her do this. The board of directors will be there. They'll expect to hear real music, classical music, not some little song she made up. Every composition was original when it was first written, Professor Williams replied. Beethoven's music was original once, so was Mozart's. Yes, but they were geniuses, Jonathan said. They were real composers. Maya is just a student who can barely play other people's music, let alone write her own. Maya felt anger rising in her chest. You don't know anything about my music, she said. I know enough, Jonathan shot back. I know it won't be good enough for this showcase. I know you're going to embarrass yourself and embarrass the school. That's quite enough, Professor Williams said firmly. Maya has every right to perform an original piece if she chooses, and I trust her judgment. Jonathan stood up from his desk. Professor, with all due respect, this is a mistake. The other conservatories will be sending their best students who have trained their whole lives for opportunities like this. If Maya performs some amateur composition, it will make our entire program look weak. Other students began to nod in agreement. Maya could see the doubt in their faces. They thought Jonathan was right. What if she plays something really bad? Whispered Lisa. What if the board thinks we're all at that level? She should play a real piece, added Marcus. Something safe. Something she can't mess up too badly. Maya felt surrounded by doubt and criticism. Part of her wanted to change her mind. Part of her wanted to choose a simple, classical piece that she could play without taking any risks, but then she remembered her grandmother's words. Music is about truth, it is about finding your own voice. I'm going to play my original composition, Maya said loudly. Cutting through the whispered conversations, the room fell silent again. Jonathan stared at her with surprise and anger. You're making a huge mistake, he said coldly. Maybe, Maya replied, but it's my mistake to make. Professor Williams made a note on his clipboard. Very well. Maya will perform Finding My Voice, an original composition. Jonathan sat down heavily in his chair. He looked frustrated and angry. This is ridiculous, he muttered after class. Maya packed her books quickly. She wanted to escape before anyone could confront her again. But as she reached the door, she heard footsteps behind her. Maya, wait, she turned around. Professor Williams was walking toward her. Could I speak with you privately? He asked. Maya's heart sank. Was he going to ask her to reconsider? Was he going to tell her that Jonathan was right? They walked to his small office down the hall. The walls were covered with pictures of famous musicians and composers. Professor Williams sat behind his desk and gestured for Maya to take the chair across from him. Maya, he began carefully, I want you to know that I support your decision to perform an original piece. Maya felt relief wash over her. Thank you, Professor. However, he continued, I also want to make sure you understand what you're taking on. The board of directors will have certain expectations. They're used to hearing established repertoire at a high level. Maya nodded. I understand. Do you? Because if your performance doesn't go well, it could affect your standing in the program. It could affect your scholarship. Maya had not thought about that. Her scholarship was the only reason she could attend the conservatory. Without it, she would have to leave school and give up her dream of studying music. Are you saying I shouldn't perform my piece? She asked quietly. Professor Williams was quiet for a moment. I'm saying you should be very sure about your choice. Jonathan may have been unkind in how he expressed himself, but he wasn't entirely wrong. This is a risk. Maya looked at the pictures on the wall. All those famous musicians had taken risks. Too, they had all faced doubt and criticism. Professor, can I ask you something? Of course. When you listen to Jonathan play, how does it make you feel? Professor Williams seemed surprised by the question. Jonathan is technically excellent. His training has been superb. But how does it make you feel? Professor Williams was quiet for a long time. If I'm being honest, it's impressive but not moving. It's like listening to a very advanced music box. Perfect but somehow empty. Maya nodded. That's what I thought too. Why do you ask? Because when I play my grandmother's song, it feels different, it feels alive. It feels like it means something. Professor Williams leaned back in his chair. Tell me about this piece. Who wrote it? My grandmother. She wrote it many years ago when she was young and struggling. She called it Finding My Voice because it was about discovering who she really was as a person and as a musician. And she taught it to you? Yes, every evening for the past 2 weeks. At first I could barely play it, but now it feels like part of me. Professor Williams smiled slightly. Mia, can I tell you something? In 30 years of teaching, I've heard thousands of students play. Most of them play beautifully, some play perfectly. But very few play with genuine emotion, very few play with soul. Maya felt a warm feeling spread through her chest. From what I've observed of your playing in class, Professor Williams continued, you have something special, something that can't be taught. And if this piece truly expresses who you are as a musician, then you should absolutely perform it. Even though it's risky? Especially because it's risky. The greatest artists in history were all risk takers. They all chose to be authentic rather than safe. Maya stood up to leave. Thank you, Professor, for believing in me. And just promise me one thing, he said as she reached the door. What's that? Promise me you'll practice hard this week. If you're going to take this risk, make sure you're prepared for it. Maya smiled. I promise. She left Professor Williams' office feeling more determined than ever. She knew the next week would be difficult. She knew Jonathan and the other students would continue to doubt her. But she also knew she was making the right choice. That evening, Maya practiced for 3 hours straight. Her fingers moved over the keys of her grandmother's old piano, playing the melody that had become so precious to her. Finding My Voice was more than just a song now. It was her declaration of independence, her statement that she belonged in the world of music. Even if she was different from everyone else, her grandmother sat in her chair nearby, listening and occasionally offering gentle suggestions. Remember, she said, the third phrase should sound like a question, like you're searching for something. Maya woke up on Monday morning with a heavy feeling in her chest. 4 days until the showcase. 4 days until she would either prove herself or fail completely in front of everyone who mattered. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jonathan's mocking face. She heard the other students whispering about her foolish choice to play an original piece. She imagined the board of directors shaking their heads in disappointment. At breakfast, her grandmother noticed her picking at her food. You must eat, little bird, she said gently. Your body needs strength for what's ahead. Maya forced herself to take a few bites of toast, but everything tasted like cardboard. Her stomach was too twisted with worry to feel hungry. I keep thinking about what Jonathan said, Maya admitted. What if he's right? What if I don't belong there? Her grandmother set down her coffee cup and looked directly at Maya. Tell me something. When you play our song, how do you feel? Like I'm telling a story that matters, like the music is alive. And when you hear Jonathan play? Maya thought about it. Like I'm listening to a machine, perfect but cold? Then trust that feeling, her grandmother said. Music is not about being perfect, it is about being real. Maya nodded, but doubt still clouded her mind. She finished breakfast quickly and gathered her things for school. The walk to the bus stop felt longer than usual. Every step took her closer to another day of facing her classmates who thought she was making a terrible mistake on the bus. Maya stared out the window at the city, passing by. She thought about all the people in their cars and offices who would never know about the showcase. To them, it was just another Monday. But for Maya, it felt like the beginning of the most important week of her life. At the conservatory, Maya tried to keep her head down and avoid attention. But it seemed like everyone was talking about the showcase. In the hallways, she heard conversations about dresses and sheet music and which pieces were most likely to impress the board. During music theory class, Professor Williams announced the order of performances for Friday night. We will begin with Sarah performing Chopin, followed by Marcus with Beethoven. He read from his list. then Lisa with Debussy, Jonathan with Rachmaninoff, and finally Maya with her original composition. Maya's heart sank. She was performing last. That meant if she failed, it would be the final impression the board had of the entire program. After class, Jonathan cornered her in the hallway. "Last on the program," he said with a cruel smile. "Do you know what that means?" Maya did not answer. "It means you're the grand finale, the big finish. If you mess up, that's what everyone will remember." He leaned closer. "Are you sure you want that responsibility?" "Leave me alone, Jonathan," Maya said, trying to walk past him, but he blocked her path. "I'm trying to help you. There's still time to change your mind. You could play something simple, something safe. Save yourself the humiliation." "I'm not changing my mind." Jonathan's expression hardened. "Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you. When you crash and burn up there, remember that I tried to save you from yourself." Maya pushed past him and hurried toward the practice rooms. Her hands were shaking with anger and fear. Maybe Jonathan was right. Maybe performing last was too much pressure. Maybe she should play something safer. She found her usual practice room in the basement and sat down at the old piano. She tried to play Finding My Voice, but her fingers felt clumsy. She kept making mistakes in places where she usually played perfectly. Maya stopped and put her head in her hands. The doubt was eating away at her confidence like acid. Every cruel word Jonathan had said was echoing in her mind, making it impossible to focus on the music. She tried again, but this time she made even more mistakes. Frustrated, she slammed her hands down on the keys, creating a harsh, discordant sound. "This is hopeless," she whispered to herself. Maya spent the rest of the day in a fog of anxiety. During her other classes, she could barely concentrate. Teachers. Voices seemed to come from far away. The words in her textbooks blurred together. At lunch, she sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria. She could see Jonathan at a table across the room, surrounded by his usual group of admirers. They were all laughing about something. Maya wondered if they were laughing about her. The afternoon practice session went no better than the morning one. Maya's fingers felt disconnected from her brain. The beautiful melody that had felt so natural just days before now seemed impossible to play. By the time she got home that evening, Maya was exhausted and discouraged. Her grandmother was waiting for her with dinner ready, but Maya went straight to her room instead. She lay on her bed and stared at the ceiling. Through the thin walls, she could hear the sounds of the city. Cars honking, people talking, the washing machines spinning downstairs in Mr. Kim's laundromat. These were the sounds of her real life. Maybe she should stop pretending she belonged in the world of classical music. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Little bird," her grandmother's voice was gentle. "May I come in?" "I guess," Maya said without moving from the bed. Her grandmother entered and sat on the edge of the mattress. "You did not eat dinner." "I'm not hungry." "And you did not practice tonight." Maya rolled over to face the wall. "What's the point? I can't play it anymore. I keep making mistakes. Jonathan was right. I don't belong there." Her grandmother was quiet for a long moment. Then she began to hum softly. It was the melody of Finding My Voice, but slower and gentler than usual. "When I wrote this song," her grandmother said, still humming, "I was about your age. I had just moved to this city with nothing but a suitcase and a dream." Maya turned back around. Her grandmother rarely talked about her past. "I wanted to be a professional musician," her grandmother continued. "I auditioned for orchestras, for bands, for any group that would listen. But everyone told me the same thing. I was not good enough. I was the wrong color, the wrong gender, the wrong class. I did not have the right training or the right connections. What did you do? I almost gave up. I almost threw away my music and found a normal job like everyone expected me to do." Her grandmother smiled sadly. "But then I realized something. I was trying so hard to be what other people wanted that I had forgotten who I really was." Maya sat up on the bed. "So you wrote the song?" "I wrote the song to remind myself that my voice mattered, that my music had value, even if it was different from what other people expected." "But you never became a professional musician." "No." Her grandmother agreed, but I never stopped being a musician. I taught piano lessons to neighborhood children. I played at church services and community events. I wrote songs and shared them with people who understood their value. Maya felt tears forming in her eyes. But that's not the same as being successful. What is success, little bird? Is it playing in fancy concert halls for people who do not really listen? Is it winning competitions and impressing judges? Her grandmother took Maya's hand. Or is it touching someone's heart with your music? Is it being true to yourself and sharing that truth with others? Maya thought about this. I want to be successful, though. I want to prove that I belong, and you will. But not by trying to be someone else. You will prove it by being yourself. Her grandmother stood up and walked to the door. Come, let us practice together. Maya followed her grandmother to the living room. The old piano looked warm and welcoming in the lamplight. Her grandmother sat down and began to play Finding My Voice. But this time she played it differently. She played it with all the emotion that had inspired her to write it so many years ago. She played it like it was the most important song in the world. Maya sat down beside her and listened. Slowly, she began to remember why she had fallen in love with this piece. It was not just notes on a page. It was her grandmother's story. It was her own story. It was the story of anyone who had ever felt lost and then found their way. When her grandmother finished, Maya placed her own hands on the keys. She closed her eyes and thought about the music instead of the showcase. She thought about the story the song told instead of the people who would be listening. This time, her fingers found the right notes. The melody flowed like water, natural and effortless. Maya played the entire piece without a single mistake. There, her grandmother said softly. There is the real Maya, the one who plays with her heart instead of her fears. Maya felt something shift inside her chest. The fear was still there, but it was smaller now. In its place was something stronger, something that felt like purpose. I keep forgetting, Maya said. I keep thinking about Jonathan and the board of directors and everyone else. But when I focus on the music itself, it feels right. That is the secret, her grandmother said. When you perform on Friday, do not think about the audience. Think about the music. Think about the story you are telling. Think about why this song matters. Maya nodded. Will you help me practice every night this week? Of course. But Maya, you must promise me something. What? Promise me you will not let other people's fear become your own. Jonathan is afraid because he knows you have something he lacks. The other students doubt you because they do not understand what real music sounds like. But their fear and doubt do not belong to you. Maya looked at her grandmother's wise, kind face. I promise I'll try. Friday morning arrived gray and cloudy. Maya woke up with her stomach doing flips. Today was the day. In 8 hours, she would walk onto the stage of the conservatory's main recital hall and perform in front of the most important audience of her life. She lay in bed for a few extra minutes, listening to the familiar sounds of her neighborhood waking up. The rumble of buses, the voices of people heading to work, the gentle hum of Mr. Kim opening his laundromat downstairs. These sounds had been the soundtrack of her entire life, but tonight she would be performing in a world that felt completely different. Her grandmother was already up, making breakfast. The smell of eggs and toast filled the small apartment. Good morning, little bird, her grandmother said with a warm smile. Today is your big day. Maya sat down at the kitchen table, but found she could barely eat. Her throat felt tight and her hands were shaky. I don't think I can do this, she whispered. Her grandmother sat down across from her. Tell me what you are afraid of. Everything. What if I forget the notes? What if my hands shake too much to play? What if everyone thinks the song is terrible? Maya's voice got smaller with each worry. What if Jonathan is right and I really don't belong there? Her grandmother reached across the table and took Maya's hands in her own. They were warm and steady. Little bird, listen to me. You have practiced this song every day for 3 weeks. Your fingers know every note. Your heart knows every emotion. The music is already inside you. But what if No, her grandmother said gently but firmly. No more what-ifs. Today you must trust yourself. Trust your gift. Trust that you have something important to share with the world. Maya nodded, trying to absorb her grandmother's confidence. After breakfast, she gathered her things for school. In her bag was the dress her grandmother had altered for tonight's performance. It was a simple blue dress, nothing fancy, but her grandmother had sewn small musical note buttons down the front that made it special. At the conservatory, the energy was electric. Students rushed through the halls, carrying garment bags and talking excitedly about the evening's performances. Maya tried to blend into the background, but Professor Williams spotted her near her locker. "Maya, how are you feeling today?" "Nervous," she admitted. Professor Williams smiled kindly. "That's perfectly normal. Even professional musicians get nervous before important performances. The nerves mean you care about doing well." "Professor, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you really think I should perform my grandmother's song? Everyone else is playing famous pieces by famous composers. What if mine doesn't fit?" Professor Williams was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. "Maya, in all my years of teaching, I've learned that the most memorable performances are not always the most technically perfect ones. They are the ones that come from the heart, the ones that tell a truth the audience needs to hear. But what if the board doesn't understand? Then they will learn something new, and that is never a bad thing." Maya felt slightly better after talking to Professor Williams, but as the day went on, her nervousness grew stronger. During lunch, she could barely eat. In her afternoon classes, she found it impossible to concentrate. The worst part was seeing Jonathan. He seemed completely relaxed and confident. During their shared music theory class, he made jokes with his friends and acted like tonight was just another ordinary performance. Maya envied his ease. After school, Maya went home to rest and prepare. She tried to take a nap but found herself staring at the ceiling instead. Her mind raced with all the things that could go wrong. At 4 o'clock, her grandmother knocked on her bedroom door. "Time to get ready, little bird." Maya showered and put on the blue dress. Her grandmother had also made her a small hair clip, decorated with tiny pearls that had belonged to Maya's great-grandmother. "You look beautiful," her grandmother said as she helped Maya with the clip. "But more importantly, you look like yourself." They ate a light dinner together, though Maya could manage only a few bites. At 6 o'clock, it was time to leave for the conservatory. "I wish you could come with me," Maya said as they waited for the bus. "I will be with you," her grandmother replied, placing her hand over Maya's heart. "Right here. Every note you play, I will be listening." The bus ride to the conservatory felt endless. Maya watched the familiar streets pass by, wondering if this would be her last evening as a student there. If her performance went badly, she might lose her scholarship and have to leave the program. When they arrived at the conservatory, Maya was amazed by the transformation. The usually quiet building was buzzing with activity. Well-dressed people climbed the front steps, chatting excitedly about the evening's program. These were parents, teachers, music lovers, and most importantly, the board of directors who held Maya's future in their hands. Maya said goodbye to her grandmother at the entrance and made her way to the backstage area. The other performers were already there, warming up and making final preparations. Sarah was practicing scales on a small keyboard, her fingers moving with perfect precision. Marcus was reviewing his sheet music one last time. Visa was doing breathing exercises to calm her nerves, and Jonathan was holding court in the center of the room, telling a story about his summer at an exclusive music camp in Europe. He looked completely relaxed, as if performing for important judges was something he did every week. When he saw Maya, his expression changed to one of amused sympathy. Well, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "If it isn't our grand finale, are you ready for your big moment?" Maya ignored him and found a quiet corner to sit in. She closed her eyes and tried to run through finding my voice in her mind, but Jonathan's voice kept breaking through her concentration. "I still can't believe they're letting you perform an original piece," he continued. "Do you have any idea how important tonight is?" The board is looking for serious musicians, not amateur songwriters. Jonathan, leave her alone, Sarah said. Quietly, I'm just trying to help, Jonathan replied with fake innocence. Someone should explain to her what she's up against. The board expects excellence. They expect professionalism. They expect real music. Maya felt her confidence crumbling. Her hands started to shake and her breathing became shallow. Maybe Jonathan was right. Maybe she had made a terrible mistake. Then Professor Williams appeared backstage. Good evening, everyone. The recital will begin in 15 minutes. Sarah, you're first, so please be ready to go on stage. Sarah nodded and gathered her music. As she headed toward the stage entrance, she stopped next to Maya. Don't listen to him, she whispered. Play from your heart. That's what real music is. Maya looked up in surprise. Sarah had never spoken to her before, except to answer questions in class. Thank you, Maya whispered back. Sarah smiled and walked away to make her entrance. Maya could hear the audience settling into their seats in the recital hall. Through the backstage monitors, she could see Professor Williams taking the podium to introduce the evening's program. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this evening's showcase of our finest young musicians. Tonight you will hear performances by 5 exceptional students, each representing the future of classical music. Maya's stomach clenched. The future of classical music. Was she really part of that future? Sarah's performance began. Through the monitors, Maya could see her sitting at the grand piano, her posture perfect, her concentration complete. The Chopin piece flowed beautifully from her fingers. The audience listened with obvious appreciation. When Sarah finished, the applause was warm and sustained. She stood and bowed gracefully before exiting the stage. Beautiful job, Professor Williams told her as she returned backstage. Marcus was next. His Beethoven was powerful and dramatic. Maya could see the board members nodding with approval as he played. His technique was flawless, his interpretation mature and thoughtful. Then it was Lisa's turn. Her Debussy was like water, flowing and shimmering with delicate beauty. The audience seemed transported by the dreamy, impressionistic music, all 3. Performances had been excellent. The bar was set very high. Maya felt smaller and more out of place with each passing minute. Finally, it was Jonathan's turn. He strode onto the stage with complete confidence, his expensive tuxedo perfectly fitted, his hair styled to perfection. He sat at the piano and immediately launched into Rachmaninoff's challenging concerto. Maya had to admit that his playing was extraordinary. His fingers flew across the keys with stunning speed and accuracy. The complex harmonies and thundering passages were executed flawlessly. The audience was clearly impressed by the technical fireworks, but as Maya listened, she noticed something. For all its perfection, Jonathan's performance felt empty. It was like watching a machine demonstrate its capabilities. Impressive, but somehow cold. When Jonathan finished, the applause was thunderous. He stood and bowed with obvious satisfaction, his smile confident and triumphant. As he walked off stage, he caught Maya's eye and winked. Good luck following that, he whispered as he passed her. Maya's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Professor Williams was introducing her to the audience. Our final performer this evening is Maya Chun, who will be presenting an original composition titled Finding My Voice. Maya heard murmurs from the audience. She could imagine what they were thinking. The stage lights were brighter than Maya had expected. As she walked toward the grand piano, she felt like she was moving through a dream. Everything seemed heightened and surreal. The sound of her footsteps on the wooden stage floor echoed in the large hall. Maya could see the audience clearly now. Hundreds of faces looked up at her with curiosity and expectation. In the front rows sat the board of directors, 5 distinguished-looking people in elegant clothes. These were the people who would decide her fate. She spotted her grandmother in the audience sitting near the back. Her grandmother smiled and placed her hand over her heart, their special signal. Maya felt a small spark of warmth in her chest. Maya reached the piano bench and sat down carefully. The grand piano was even more magnificent up close. Its black surface gleamed under the lights, and the keys looked perfect and inviting. This was so different from her grandmother's old piano with its scratched wood and yellowed keys. She adjusted the bench height and placed her hands on her lap. The hall was completely silent. Maya could hear her own breathing and the faint hum of the air conditioning. Somewhere in the audience, someone coughed quietly. Maya looked out at all the expectant faces and felt a wave of panic. What was she doing here? She was just a girl from a small apartment above a laundromat. These people were expecting to hear professional quality music performed by a serious musician. Instead, they were getting an amateur playing a song written by her grandmother. Her hands began to shake. She tried to remember the opening notes of Finding My Voice, but her mind went blank. The melody that had been so clear just hours ago now seemed to have vanished completely. Maya's breathing became shallow and rapid. She could feel sweat forming on her forehead despite the cool air in the hall. The silence stretched on and on. People were starting to shift in their seats, wondering why she was not beginning to play. In the front row, she could see one of the board members checking his watch. Another woman whispered something to the person next to her. Maya felt her face burning with embarrassment. This was it. This was the moment Jonathan had predicted. She was about to humiliate herself in front of everyone who mattered. She was about to prove that she really did not belong here. Maya started to stand up, ready to run off the stage and disappear forever. But then something stopped her. Through the stage lights, she caught sight of her grandmother again. Her grandmother was not looking worried or embarrassed. Instead, she was looking at Maya with complete love and confidence. Suddenly, Maya remembered her grandmother's words from that morning. The music is already inside you. Maya closed her eyes and took a slow, deep breath. She stopped thinking about the audience and the board members and Jonathan's cruel predictions. Instead, she thought about her grandmother sitting at their old piano, playing this beautiful melody for the first time. She thought about the story behind the song. A young woman, far from home, feeling lost and afraid, struggling to find her place in the world, searching for her own voice in a world that did not seem to want to hear it. Maya realized that was exactly how she felt right now. Lost and afraid and searching for her voice. This song was not just her grandmother's story. It was her story too. She opened her eyes and placed her hands on the keys. The piano felt warm and welcoming under her fingers. Maya found middle C and pressed it gently. The single note rang out clear and pure in the silent hall. It was not just a note. It was the beginning of a conversation. A question asked with honesty and hope. Maya let the sound fade completely before she played the next note. Then the next. Slowly, carefully, she began to build the opening phrase of Finding My Voice. The melody was simple at first, like someone tentatively speaking their truth for the first time. Maya's fingers moved with growing confidence as the phrases became more complex and assured. She was no longer aware of the audience, or the stage lights, or the importance of the moment. She was completely lost in the music, in the story it told, in the emotions it expressed. The song built to its first climax, a passage that spoke of struggle and doubt. Maya's hands moved across the keyboard with passion and intensity. This was the part where the young woman in the song faced her fears and decided to keep searching for her truth. As the music continued, Maya felt something magical happening. She was not just playing notes anymore. She was speaking directly to the hearts of everyone listening. She was sharing something real and vulnerable and beautiful. The middle section of the song was the most challenging part. It required delicate touch and precise timing. Maya had practiced this section hundreds of times, but now it flowed from her fingers like it was the most natural thing in the world. This part of the song was about discovery, about the moment when the lost young woman began to understand who she really was. The melody danced and soared, full of joy and wonder and newfound confidence. Maya could feel the audience leaning forward in their seats. The energy in the room had completely changed. People were not just listening politely anymore. They were captivated, drawn into the story the music was telling. As the song moved toward its conclusion, Maya poured everything she had into the performance. All her hopes and dreams and fears. All her love for music and for her grandmother and for the truth they had shared together. The final passages were triumphant but not boastful. They spoke of someone who had found their voice and was ready to use it. Someone who had discovered that their differences were not weaknesses, but strengths. Maya played the last chord and let it ring out in the hall. The sound seemed to hang in the air forever, beautiful and complete and perfect. Then there was silence. Maya sat at the piano, her hands still on the keys, breathing hard from the emotional intensity of the performance. She looked out at the audience. Unsure of what she would see, for a moment nobody moved. The silence stretched on and on. Maya's heart sank. Had she failed? Had the performance been as bad as she feared? Then, from somewhere in the back of the hall, came the sound of slow, deliberate clapping. Maya looked up and saw her grandmother on her feet, applauding with tears streaming down her face. One by one, other people began to stand and applaud. First a few, then more, then suddenly the entire audience was on their feet, clapping with genuine enthusiasm and emotion. Maya looked toward the board of directors in the front row. The woman who had been checking her watch earlier was now standing and applauding with obvious appreciation. The man next to her was wiping his eyes with a handkerchief. The applause continued for what felt like forever. Maya stood up from the piano bench and took a small bow, overwhelmed by the response. She had expected polite clapping at best. She had never imagined anything like this. As she prepared to leave the stage, Professor Williams appeared beside her. "Stay here," he said quietly. "I think someone wants to speak with you." The applause finally died down, and the audience began to return to their seats, but one person remained standing. It was Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the chairwoman of the International Music Foundation Board. Dr. Harper was an elegant woman in her 60s with silver hair and intelligent eyes. She was famous throughout the music world for her ability to recognize talent and her commitment to supporting young musicians. She walked up onto the stage, and the audience fell silent again, curious about what she would say. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Harper began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "In my 40 years of involvement with music education, I have heard thousands of young performers. Most of them play beautifully. Many of them play perfectly. But very few of them play with the kind of authentic emotion and genuine artistry we have just witnessed." Maya felt her knees go weak. Was this really happening? "Miss Chun," Dr. Harper continued, turning to face Maya directly, "your performance this evening has reminded us all why we fell in love with music in the first place. You have shown us that technical perfection means nothing without heart, and that the most powerful music comes from truth and vulnerability." The audience murmured with agreement. Maya could hardly believe what she was hearing. "The International Music Foundation would be honored to offer you a full scholarship for advanced study with any teacher of your choosing, anywhere in the world." The audience erupted in applause again. Maya felt tears of joy and relief streaming down her face. She had done it. She had not just survived the performance. She had triumphed. As she looked out at the cheering audience, Maya's eyes found Jonathan in the wings. His face was a mixture of shock, disbelief, and grudging respect. For the first time since she had known him, he was speechless. Maya smiled and walked off the stage, her heart full of gratitude and joy. She had found her voice, and the world had listened. Professor Williams met her in the wings with a huge smile on his face. "Maya, that was extraordinary. I have never seen an audience respond like that to a student performance." Before Maya could respond, Sarah, Marcus, and Lisa surrounded her, offering congratulations and praise. "That was beautiful," Sarah said with genuine warmth. "I had goosebumps the entire time." "Where did that song come from?" Marcus asked. "It was incredible." Even Jonathan approached, though he looked uncomfortable. "Nice job," he said quietly. It was not much, but coming from him, it felt like a huge admission. The lobby of the conservatory buzzed with excitement long after the final applause had ended. People clustered in small groups, discussing the evening's performances in animated voices. But most of the conversation centered on one topic, Maya's extraordinary finale. Maya stood near the back of the lobby with her grandmother, still trying to process what had just happened. Her legs felt weak and her hands were still shaking slightly from the adrenaline of the performance. "Miss Chun?" Maya turned to see Dr. Harper approaching with the other board members. Her heart started racing again. Even though the performance was over, these people still held her future in their hands. "Dr. Harper," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I hope you don't mind," Dr. Harper said with a warm smile, "but I would love to speak with you more about your musical background. And I'd very much like to meet the person who wrote that beautiful piece." Maya felt a surge of pride as she introduced her grandmother. "Dr. Harper, this is my grandmother, Mrs. Chung. She's the composer of Finding My Voice." Dr. Harper's eyes lit up with interest. "Mrs. Chun, it's an honor to meet you. That composition is extraordinary." The emotional depth, the structural sophistication, it's truly remarkable. Maya's grandmother looked surprised and pleased. "Thank you. I wrote it many years ago when I was struggling to find my place in the world." "Well, you certainly found it," said another board member, Dr. Robert Martinez. "And you've clearly passed your musical gifts on to your granddaughter." As the adults talked, Maya noticed other students and their families approaching. Sarah came over with her parents, both professional musicians whom Maya had seen in concert before. "Maya, I wanted to introduce you to my parents," Sarah said. "They were completely blown away by your performance." Sarah's mother, a renowned violinist, shook Maya's hand warmly. "My dear, that was one of the most moving performances I've heard in years. You have a very special gift. Where will you be studying next?" Sarah's father asked. "With Dr. Harper's recommendation, you could train with anyone in the world." Maya realized she had not even thought about that yet. The scholarship offer was so unexpected that she had not had time to consider what it might mean. "I honestly don't know," Maya admitted. "This is all so overwhelming." Professor Williams appeared at her side. "Maya, there's no rush to decide anything tonight. But I will say this, you have options now that most musicians only dream of." More people continued to approach throughout the evening. Music teachers from other schools, professional musicians, who had been in the audience, even some of the other students' parents who wanted to meet the young woman who had created such a stir. Maya noticed that the atmosphere around her had completely changed. Just hours ago, she had been the quiet scholarship student whom most people ignored. Now she was the center of attention, the one everyone wanted to meet and congratulate. But the most meaningful moment came when Jonathan finally approached her. Directly. He had been hanging back with his own family, and Maya could see him having what looked like an intense conversation with his famous father when he finally walked over. His usual arrogance was nowhere to be seen. He looked uncertain and perhaps even a little humbled. "Maya," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure others could not hear, "I owe you an apology." Maya was so surprised she did not know what to say. "I was wrong," Jonathan continued. "About your music, about your abilities, about whether you belong here. That performance tonight, it was incredible. It was the kind of music I wish I could play." Maya found her voice. "Thank you for saying that." "I guess I was threatened by you," Jonathan admitted. "My whole life I've been told that success in music comes from perfect technique and prestigious training. But listening to you tonight, I realized there's something else. Something I don't have." "What's that?" "Heart," Jonathan said simply. "Your music has heart, mine is just direct." Maya looked at this young man who had caused her so much pain and self-doubt. She could see that he was genuinely struggling with something. "Jonathan, you're incredibly talented," she said generously. "Maybe you just need to find your own voice like I did." He nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe so. Anyway, congratulations. You deserve everything good that comes from tonight." As Jonathan walked away, Maya felt a sense of closure. The person who had made her feel so small and unwelcome had just acknowledged her talent and her place in the music world. Dr. Harper returned to Maya's side as the crowd began to thin out. "Maya, I don't want to pressure you," she said, "but I hope you'll consider our offer seriously. You have the kind of gift that comes along once in a generation." With the right training and support, you could have a profound impact on the music world. What kind of impact? Maya asked. You could help expand what people think classical music can be, Dr. Harper explained. Your performance tonight showed that there's room in our art form for new voices, new stories, new ways of expressing human experience. Maya's grandmother squeezed her hand. What do you think, little bird? Maya looked around the lobby at all the people who had been moved by her music. She thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The doubts, the struggles, the moments when she had almost given up. I think, Maya said slowly, that I want to keep learning and growing as a musician. I want to honor the gift I've been given and use it to touch people's hearts the way music has always touched mine. Dr. Harper smiled. Then we'll be in touch soon to discuss the details. Take some time to think about what kind of training would serve you best. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, Maya and her grandmother found themselves alone in the lobby. The janitor was already beginning to clean up, stacking chairs and turning off lights in the recital hall. How do you feel, little bird? Her grandmother asked. Maya thought about it. Grateful, she said finally, and excited, and a little scared about what comes next. Fear is natural when facing new opportunities, her grandmother said. But remember what you learned tonight. When you play from your heart, when you share your truth, people will listen. They walked slowly toward the exit, both lost in their own thoughts. Outside, the city continued its nighttime rhythm. Cars passed by, people walked the sidewalks, life went on as usual. But for Maya, everything had changed. Grandmother, she said as they waited for the bus, will you keep teaching me? Even if I study with famous teachers, will you still help me remember where my music comes from? Her grandmother smiled and pulled Maya close. Always, little bird. Music teachers can teach you technique and theory and all the technical skills you need. But I will always be here to remind you that the most important part of music comes from here. She placed her hand over Maya's heart. The bus arrived and they climbed aboard for the familiar ride home. As Maya watched the conservatory grow smaller, in the distance she reflected on how much had changed since that morning. She had walked into the building as a nervous, uncertain student. She was leaving as a recognized artist with a bright future ahead of her, but perhaps the most important change was inside herself. She had finally, truly found her voice. Not just as a musician, but as a person. She knew who she was and what she had to offer the world. When they reached their stop, Maya and her grandmother climbed the stairs to their small apartment above the laundromat. Nothing had physically changed about their home, but somehow it felt different. It felt like the place where an artist lived and created, not just where a poor student struggled to fit in. Maya's grandmother went to make tea while Maya sat at the old piano. She played Finding My Voice one more time, softly so as not to disturb the neighbors. The melody sounded different now than it had that morning. It sounded like a promise fulfilled rather than a hope expressed. As she played, Maya thought about all the possibilities that lay ahead. She could study with master teachers, perform in famous concert halls, maybe even compose her own music professionally. The world was open to her in ways she had never imagined, but she also thought about staying connected to her roots, to the small apartment and the old piano and the grandmother who had given her the greatest gift of all, the courage to be herself. What are you thinking about? Her grandmother asked, returning with 2 cups of tea. Everything, Maya said. The future, the past, what it all means. And what do you think it means? Maya was quiet for a moment, her fingers still moving gently over the keys. I think it means that everyone has a voice worth hearing. And sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected places. Her grandmother nodded with satisfaction. Now you understand what I have been trying to teach you all these years. They sat together in comfortable silence, sipping their tea and listening to the gentle sounds of the city settling into sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. There would be decisions to make about schools and teachers, and the direction of Maya's career, but tonight, Maya was content to sit in the small apartment that had shaped her. with the woman who had believed in her from the beginning, surrounded by the music that had finally helped her find her place. In the world, she had found her voice, and she would never lose it again. 6 months later, Maya stood in the green room of Carnegie Hall, adjusting the collar of her new black dress. Through the walls, she could hear the murmur of the audience settling into their seats for the International Music Foundation's annual showcase concert. So much had changed since that night at the conservatory. Maya had chosen to study with Dr. Elena Vasquez, a renowned pianist and composer who specialized in helping young musicians develop their unique artistic voices. The training had been intensive and challenging, but also incredibly rewarding. Maya had learned advanced techniques and studied the great classical repertoire, but perhaps more importantly, she had learned how to compose her own music while staying true to the emotional honesty that had made her first performance so powerful. Tonight, she would be performing not just Finding My Voice, but also a new piece she had written called Grandmother's Hands. It was a musical portrait of all the women in her family who had passed down their strength and wisdom through generations. Maya, Professor Williams appeared in the doorway. He had become not just a teacher but a mentor and friend. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous but excited," Maya said honestly. "It's hard to believe I'm actually here." "Believe it," Professor Williams said with a smile. "You've earned this moment through talent, hard work, and courage." Maya thought about the journey that had brought her here. The months of study with Dr. Vasquez had pushed her to grow in ways she never expected. She had learned to combine technical excellence with emotional authenticity. Her playing had become more sophisticated while remaining deeply personal, but success had not changed who she was at her core. Maya still lived in the small apartment with her grandmother. She still practiced on the old piano with its scratched wood and yellowed keys. And she still drew inspiration from the sounds and stories of her neighborhood. In fact, those connections had become stronger. Maya now taught piano lessons to children in her community, passing on not just musical skills but also the confidence to believe in their own voices. She had started a scholarship fund to help other young musicians from low-income families pursue their dreams. "The audience is ready for you," Professor Williams said. "Are you ready for them?" Maya nodded. "I think so." She made her way to the stage entrance, where she could see the magnificent Carnegie Hall spread out before her. The golden walls and red velvet seats were filled with an audience that included some of the most important people in classical music. In the front row, Maya spotted her grandmother, wearing the same dress she had sewn for Maya's first performance, but with a new silk scarf Maya had bought her. Her grandmother caught her eye and smiled, placing her hand over her heart in their familiar gesture. Also in the audience were her former classmates from the conservatory. Sarah had become a close friend and frequent collaborator. Even Jonathan was there, looking genuinely pleased to see Maya's success. His own playing had evolved too, becoming warmer and more expressive after their conversation that night 6 months ago. Maya took her place at the beautiful Steinway grand piano. The instrument was perfectly tuned and incredibly responsive. But as she placed her hands on the keys, she thought not of this magnificent piano, but of the old one at home where she had first learned to play. She began with Finding My Voice, the piece that had started it all. But tonight's performance was different from that first terrifying showcase. Maya played with the confidence of someone who truly knew who she was, and what she had to say. The melody unfolded with perfect clarity and deep emotion. Maya had performed this piece dozens of times now, but it never failed to move her. It still told the story of a young woman finding her place in the world, but now it also represented the journey Maya had taken since then. When the piece ended, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic, but Maya barely heard it. She was already transitioning into Grandmother's Hands, letting the final notes of one piece blend seamlessly into the opening of the next. This new composition was more complex than Finding My Voice, incorporating elements of classical structure with the rhythms and harmonies Maya had grown up hearing. It painted a musical picture of her great-grandmother's work-worn hands sewing by candlelight, her grandmother's gentle hands teaching a young girl to play piano, And Maya's own hands now carrying that legacy forward. As she played, Maya thought about all the hands that had shaped her journey. Professor Williams' encouraging hands as he demonstrated techniques, Dr. Vasquez's precise hands, showing her how to articulate difficult passages, Jonathan's initially hostile hands that had challenged her to prove herself, Sarah's supportive hands applauding her success, but most of all, she thought about her grandmother's loving hands that had first placed her fingers on piano. Kizan taught her that music was about heart, not perfection, the piece built to a powerful climax that represented all the generations of strong women in Maya's family coming together in harmony. Then it settled into a gentle conclusion that spoke of love passed down through time and wisdom, shared across generations. When Maya played the final chord, the hall fell into the kind of profound silence that only follows truly exceptional performances. Then the audience erupted in the most enthusiastic ovation Maya had ever received. People leaped to their feet, applauding and calling out, "Brava!" Maya stood and bowed deeply, tears of joy streaming down her face. She looked out at the standing ovation and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. Dr. Harper appeared on stage to present Maya with the International Music Foundation's highest honor for young composers. Maya Shin represents everything we hope to nurture in young musicians, she said to the audience. Technical excellence combined with emotional authenticity, respect for tradition balanced with innovative spirit, and above all, the courage to share her unique voice with the world. After the concert, the backstage area was crowded with well-wishers and music industry professionals. Record labels wanted to discuss recording contracts. Concert halls were offering performance opportunities. Magazines requested interviews, but Maya's first priority was finding her grandmother. She pushed through the crowd until she saw the familiar face that had supported her from the very beginning. They embraced wordlessly, both crying happy tears. "I'm so proud of you, little bird," her grandmother whispered, "but I am not surprised. I always knew you had something special to share with the world." "None of this would have happened without you," Maya replied. "Without your music, your belief in me, your love." "No," her grandmother said firmly. "This happened because of who you are. I just helped you see it." Professor Williams approached with Dr. Vasquez and several other important musicians who wanted to meet Maya. As she was introduced around the group, Maya noticed how different this felt from that first night at the conservatory. Then she had felt like an outsider trying to prove she belonged. Now she felt like an artist sharing her gifts with fellow musicians who understood and appreciated her work. "What's next for you?" asked a famous conductor who was interested in commissioning a piece for his orchestra. Maya thought about the question. She had so many opportunities now, so many directions her career could take, but she knew what mattered most to her. "I want to keep growing as a musician," she said. "I want to write music that tells important stories and touches people's hearts. And I want to help other young musicians find their own voices the way I was helped to find mine." Later that evening, Maya and her grandmother rode the subway home to their neighborhood. It was late, and the train car was mostly empty. Maya looked at their reflection in the dark windows and marveled at how much had changed while so much had stayed the same. "Grandmother," she said quietly, "do you ever regret not pursuing music professionally when you were young?" Her grandmother considered the question. "No, little bird. My path was different from yours, but it was still meaningful. I may not have performed in famous concert halls, but I touched lives through my teaching and my music. And most importantly, I was able to help you discover your gifts." Maya nodded. "I understand now that there are many ways to be a musician, many ways to make music matter. Yes, and you have found yours." When they reached their stop, Maya and her grandmother climbed the familiar stairs to their apartment. Mr. Kim was closing up the laundromat for the night, and he waved excitedly when he saw them. "I heard you on the radio," he called out. "The whole neighborhood is proud of you." Maya smiled and waved back. This was part of what she loved about her life. Despite all the success and recognition, she was still connected to her roots, still part of the community that had shaped her. In their apartment, Maya sat down at the old piano one more time. She played Finding My Voice softly, thinking about how the song had evolved and grown along with her own understanding of what it meant to be a musician. "What are you thinking about?" her grandmother asked, settling into her favorite chair with a cup of tea. "I'm thinking about voices," Maya said. "How everyone has one, but not everyone gets the chance to share it. How important it is that we listen to all kinds of music, all kinds of stories. And what will you do with that understanding?" Maya's fingers continued to move gently over the keys. "I'm going to use my platform to amplify other voices. I want to commission pieces by composers from different backgrounds,